Hello my Reaper friends. I just want to let you know that since I first released ItemView 2 weeks ago, I already incorporated a lot of feedback and added a lot of new features. I'm gonna go through all the new stuff and show all the tricks and shortcuts you can do to make your life easier when using the script. All the info is in Settings and Help tab, where you can see all the shortcuts and everything. There are now also tooltips for everything, so if you just hover over anything, you will see the tooltip with the shortcut that is used, so you can also study the features from there. So the first new feature since the last video was released are the fades. So now you can drag by dragging these widgets and create fades. You can right-click the fade to change the shape, and you can Alt-drag to change the slope. You can Alt-click to delete the fade. The other feature are the effects you can put on a particular item. So those are shown here, and you can add an effect by pressing either of those buttons. It will open the effects browser. Then you can just double-click. It will add the effect into the item. Let's add another one. So we have two here. Then you can drag and drop to change the order. You can bypass the items by pressing these buttons here, or by pressing Shift-click, or you can Alt-click to delete the effect, or you can delete all effects at the same time by clicking Alt on the effects button. All these actions are also undoable. You can bypass all the effects by pressing this button. The script is also responsive, so if you have like smaller space here, first the effects window goes to the second column, and if you make it even smaller, all the other buttons are moving into the second column too. The other major feature are the envelopes. By default, they are hidden, but if you click this drop-down button on the bottom left, you can toggle one of the envelopes. So for example, volume, then by pressing Shift and click, you create a new node. You can also press it anywhere and it will just move like this and create the node there. By pressing Alt, you can change the slope of the given segment. If you only drag with the left mouse button, you can move it up and down. If you Alt double click, it makes the slope back to its default linear state. If you hold Ctrl, you can paint it like a brush, and you can also select multiple nodes with right click and then move them freely. You can delete a node by pressing Alt and click. Now, if you have an envelope drawn, let's say whatever, you can then lock the envelope with this button or by pressing L. And then when you move the markers, the envelope stays locked with the markers. If I unlock, it stays where it was. There are other envelopes for panning and pitch. With pitch, what is interesting that you have semitones drawn as the horizontal lines. And if I toggle on snapping, which by default is on Ctrl+4, which is the default shortcut from Ableton, but you can change it to whatever. If the snapping is on, then you can be precise with your semitones. You can hide the envelopes by pressing H. Another bigger feature is the warp markers. If you press warp, you go into warp mode, and now you see these small little lines. Those are the transients that it detected automatically. And now you can press Ctrl+U and it will quantize them to the nearest grid. You can also see that there are these widgets and lines just as Reaper has them, and you can adjust them here when you just drag up and down, or if you shift the drag, does this. And of course you can move the markers themselves. I can press Ctrl+4 to turn off snapping and just move it freely. I can double click to remove the marker, or double click to create it on the transient, or I can click anywhere and the playhead moves there. And by right clicking, I can insert marker there, or press Ctrl+I. I can clear all of our markers from the context menu, or I can first insert a transient on a location, Ctrl+Shift+I. I can also reset the transients, so the ones I added manually will be gone. You can create a warp marker by instantly dragging the transient, and it will create a marker and it will work. You can also create 3 warp markers at the same time by Ctrl double clicking, and it will create a warp marker at either side of your original marker position. So then right away you can start moving the middle one and it will work like this. You can also insert 2 markers at the same time if you have a selection. by pressing Ctrl+I, and it creates warp marker at either edge of the selection. Another feature is the toolbar that's here. You can press right click to remove the button that is there, and if no buttons are there and you don't want to use the toolbar, it's smaller so it doesn't take as much space, but you have this small icon to add a new button. And now I have a custom button in the toolbar, and as you can see, it works. And another feature, quality of life feature, is that I have this top color bar here, which matches the color of the item. I can add another button by hovering on the right side of the buttons already in place. And now I have two buttons. Now I can also add a button by right click in the toolbar and add a button from there. But I can also add a separator, and I can reorder the buttons by just drag and dropping. This toolbar can be also customized from inside the settings. You can preview the audio right from the script. So if you press wherever, the playhead goes there. And if you press Ctrl space, previews that part of the sample. While previewing, you can also be clicking anywhere in the waveform. And it just previews from there. And anytime you press enter, it previews the sample from the start. Another new feature is this button right here. What it does is that when you turn it on and you have several items referencing the same wave file, but each one is using different part of the original sample. And then when you select all of them, you see every other part from the other items. So you instantly know which variations of the sample are used in the project. There is now pen knob, so you can pen the item left or right. You can now also move both markers at the same time by pressing Alt and dragging anywhere in between them. So it's easier to grab them. By double clicking in the waveform, you move the markers at that location. You can now also click and drag to select an area of the sample, and then you can press Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V into the Reaper timeline to paste the part of the sample that was selected into the timeline. If you also had envelopes, it copies the envelopes too. If you select a part of the waveform, you can press C to crop to that area you selected, so it moves the markers to the selection. You can also select an area and press Z, and it zooms to that area. If you press Z one more time, it unzooms where it was. If no area is selected and you press Z, it zooms into the markers. Some samples have these hue markers in them, and the markers are also visible in the waveform area. If you click the marker, it selects that whole segment, so you can instantly, for example, Ctrl+C, Ctrl+V into the timeline. Or you can instantly just Ctrl space to preview that area. You can hide the markers by pressing this Q button or by pressing M to mute them, basically. There are now new themes you can choose from in the Appearance tab, but you can also create a custom one. The shortcuts are customizable in the Shortcuts tab. Also, when working in the warp mode, there are these warp algorithms that you can choose from. You can also easily choose one of them by moving the mouse wheel, and the other drop-downs now auto-populate with sub-modes and presets. So for example, if you go to rubber band, you can choose one of the presets and it will automatically select the other settings. So you don't have to go to item properties, you have everything here. All right, so that's it for the update. ItemView is free on Gumroad, link is in the description. If you find it useful, consider buying it to support the development. And thanks a lot to everyone who downloaded it so far, and thanks to everyone who came up with suggestions and bug reports. Special thanks goes to Sanra, Catalyze, and Greg Dugan. You guys helped me a lot. If anyone has any new ideas that he or she would like to be implemented in the script, please let me know in the comments or on GitHub, and I'll think about what I can do. Cheers!